Okay, lovely. So, hello, folks. This was intended to be a live stream, but YouTube wasn't cooperating. So this is going to be a very chill video because Wizards of the Coast have released new Unearthed Arcana for what has now been redubbed 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, even though we're already on 5th edition. It's all very confusing. For the record, I think I'm going to start referring to it as 5.2. Because it's not quite 5.5. 5.1 SRD already exists. So to me, this is 5.2. So if I say 5.2, I'm referring to the new 2024 5th edition. The new 5th edition. I don't know. It's new Coke. So
now with more fifth. 10 times more edition.
Yeah. So I kind of accosted Isaac a little bit and said, do you want to join me as I live stream? Except this isn't a live stream because YouTube. But anyway, so that being said, this is all going to be really, really chill. We're just going to read through some of the stuff over the next half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. And just have a look and see what we think, share our thoughts, maybe compare it to some of the old stuff. Basically, just really casually, just reading through the Unearthed Arcana, which, if you guys like it, we might continue to do as a live stream when YouTube actually cooperates, which I'll probably do on Friday mornings, and then obviously it'll be uploaded to YouTube. But obviously, let us know in the comments if this is something that you like, because we're definitely, I mean, this is a 50 pages, Isaac, of Unearthed Arcana. This is the largest playtest material they've ever put out, ever.
I was going to say it is the most comprehensive and feature-filled Unearthed Arcana I have seen ever. Normally it's kind of, if it's a class one, they'll kind of dip into maybe 2 or 3 classes at once and kind of give a few subclasses or things like that. But this is extensive.
Massive. So yeah, we definitely won't get through this in this one video. This is probably going to take several weeks of live streams to get through, which is fine. By the time we get through it, they'll probably release another one. So so we'll see how we get on. So I don't know how much you know about this this particular playtest, Isaac, but the footnotes are, well, the headline feature I think in this one is the new weapons system, which has got me very excited because I do think weapons as they exist in the 2014 Player's Handbook are a bit bland. It's just what's your damage dice essentially and a few additional features. There's not much that separates the weapons, so they've got this new weapons system, which we'll probably talk about today because it comes up pretty early in this playtest. There's some more spells, some more feats. And specifically as well, they're looking at 5 classes, which I don't think they have yet covered in any of the playtest material for 1D&D/5.2, which are the Barbarian, the Fighter, the Sorcerer, the Warlock, and the Wizard. Which gets me very excited because if I ever play as a Forever DM, it's very rare, but if ever I do, I'm usually either Wizard, Sorcerer, or Warlock. So these are very much my sorts of classes. The monk is yet to have been given the UA treatment, but apparently that's coming. So, and then of course there are some updates to the general rules glossary and things that they're tweaking particular terms and things like the action system's been overhauled. That's all in previous playtests. This is playtest number 5. So.
At a glance, there seems to be a few kind of things that they've made. I glanced into the Barbarian class just now, and there seem to be some things, we'll discuss this later on, but there are some things that they've kind of streamlined and made a little bit easier, kind of other ways, or kind of redesign of a feature that's already there, but it's just kind of, I think, giving it a bit more of a, things that maybe people have homebrewed themselves, or maybe thought, this is nice, but it doesn't quite fit, or kind of makes a bread and butter feature of a class a bit more difficult in certain circumstances. So yeah, I'm excited to look through some of these.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. You're kind of like, the way I see this, I am a Forever DM. You're kind of turning into a forever DM, Isaac, but you are
Yeah,
essentially
I mean,
the player opinion of this conversation, as far as I'm
certainly.
concerned.
I mean, currently, Bardic Quest is the only game I play in, so it is a
Oh wow.
real wonderful source. I have DM'd a lot for various different groups. It seems like the problem is, if one is lucky enough to have people want to play your games, the buggers, they just keep wanting you to do it, don't they?
Well, I mean, it's what I always say. It's the curse of being good at your job is
Yes.
you get more work. That's the reward.
Mm.
So,
Well
yeah,
done.
we should just not be as entertaining. Basically, is
Indeed.
really the key to lightening our workload.
Indeed.
I jest, obviously. So
we love it. We love it.
so let's start by looking at the weapons, because it's like the headline feature that they're talking about with this, and it's very, very interesting what they're doing. So there's a little design note in here, which by the way, if you want to kind of follow along with what we're doing, you can find the Unearthed Arcana on D&D Beyond in the sources section, and it's got their 1D&D playtest. You can find it in there and download it. But there's a design note. I'll kind of read verbatim, and then we will discuss. So here are the new elements in this weapons section. Point number 1, each weapon now has a mastery property, which is very cool. They don't. That's not written. I said I was going to read verbatim. Each weapon now has a
very cool.
very cool. Each weapon now has a mastery property, a special property that requires a feature to unlock. The mastery properties are described within this document. Short sword has been returned to being a martial weapon rather than a simple weapon. The net, which doesn't deal damage, is now adventuring gear rather than a weapon. See adventuring gear below for the item's playtest description. The trident's damage die has been changed from 1d6 to 1d8, and its versatile die is now 1d10 rather than 1d8. The lance has the heavy and two-handed properties rather than the special property, which imposed disadvantage on some of its attack rolls, and its damage die has changed from 1d12 to 1d10. The Warpick now has the versatile property. The musket and the pistol, which previously appeared in the Dungeon Master's Guide, now appear in the martial weapons range table. As always, the DM oversees what is available for purchase in shops. The light property now appears in the weapon properties section rather than the glossary. And the throne property now allows you to draw a weapon as part of the ranged attack. So, those are the design notes before we get into the real nitty-gritty here. Any thoughts on any of that, Isaac?
I mean, yeah, I was having a glance through. You've picked out I was trying to find the ones. I have my handy player's handbook. Let us consult the Book of Hands.
Indeed. Consult the Book of Hands.
I think all of that tracks. The damage die is kind of pretty. Most of those seem to be improvements. The lance is something that I have to concede I have never seen used in a game of D&D.
I would also like to. What's the word I'm looking? I'm trying to be clever with my vocabulary.
Okay.
I will also agree. I have never seen it play.
And I think I would love to see more done with them. We'll see what this mastery thing brings to it and whether it becomes a more viable thing. I think that's something we can maybe discuss in future. I really like mounts in D&D.
Yes.
I think some DMs are quite worried about using them, thinking they're going to be too overpowered. I had my first ever character was a dwarf, and at a certain level, we all got mounts, and I had a war pig called Truffles, who I loved dearly. And we were sort of like vaguely getting into things. They used a battle axe and a hammer to kind of just taking names with that. We were playing of kind of like the charge feature. It would just be nice to see more opportunity for special weapons like the lance to be used, I think.
Yeah. I think I mean, it's been an open criticism that a lot of people in the community have said about the weapons system of 5th edition, that it's not versatile enough. So I'm liking kind of where they're going with this. Again, we'll get to the mastery properties stuff in just a second.
Yeah.
I kind of like. I mean, I'm not a fan personally of firearms in D&D. It's not my speed. But I appreciate that it's now been moved out of the optional rules and into the core rules. I think that was a required move, really.
I suppose that's to reflect more like classes, like the gunslinger that may be more common.
Yeah.
I run a steampunk campaign where firearms are a lot more commonplace, but we have loads of different kind of reskins and sort of like special rules for various different things that we kind of come to as we find them, and mad science is a lot more prevalent. It wouldn't necessarily be game breaking, but as you say, DM discretion for use of and availability.
Yeah, and I think it eradicates that debate about whether or not firearms have a place in D&D when it gets put into the core rules.
Sure.
So I was looking at the weapons table, and I was looking at the list of weapons, and I was like, this feels much bigger. But I can't actually point, other than the firearms that have been included, I can't point to anything that actually is new. So I think it's just an optical illusion, maybe because I'm looking at this on a big screen rather than in a book in my hand. But it looked bigger. I can't see anything additional other than the musket and the pistol.
No, I think they've adding. You said that short sword has been added back into martial.
Yes, which I think is a good move. It didn't feel right for me, the short sword being a simple weapon.
Oh, I mean, was that changed before? Because in my version of the player's handbook, the short sword is a martial weapon. Or is that something that they changed and then changed back?
Ooh, it's the same for me too. Hang on. The short sword has returned to being a martial weapon, so maybe they changed it in another SRD.
Odd. Fair enough.
Yeah, I have it as a martial melee weapon too.
Yeah. No, it's that they changed and then they changed their minds. Fair enough.
Yes. Which they want to do.
It's funny how they've done that on a few things recently. Oh no, let's not be.
Oh.
And demonetized.
Let's brush that under the carpet. So let's look at these changes to the weapon properties before we get into the mastery properties, which really is the headline feature, I think, and the stuff that I really want to get into before we run out of time today. But the weapon properties. So two things really to note on the weapon properties. Definitions have been changed, which will be interesting to see how the wording has changed from the current version. So I'm kind of trying to find the weapon properties in my player's handbook so that I compare. First of all is the light property. Now, one thing that I can see is that the definition is much bigger now. So the old definition, or the current 2014 definition, is a light weapon is small and easy to handle, making it ideal for use when fighting with two weapons. See the rules for two-weapon fighting. That's why it's bigger, because they've actually explained how it works
just put
under
it in
the
one
weapon
place.
property, which actually makes a lot more sense. So the weapon property reads thus. This is in the UA. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. That extra attack must be made with a different light weapon, and you don't add your ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless the modifier is negative. For example, if you take the attack action on your turn and have a short sword in one hand and a dagger in the other, each of which has the light property, you can make one attack with each weapon using your action and a bonus action, but you don't add your strength or dex modifier to the damage roll of the bonus action unless that modifier is negative. That all feels to me to be exactly the same on first blush. I can't see where that's actually mechanically different. It's just a clearer explanation, I think.
I'm trying to find two-weapon fighting in the player's handbook. There's one word at the beginning that I don't know if is the same in the original thing, which says you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn.
Well, that's what was interesting about the wording, I thought.
Hmm.
I wonder if basically what they're trying to do is kind of just explicitly state that you can attack with move, attack. I wonder if
Yes. So in the original rendition, it just says use a bonus action to attack with a different light melee weapon that you're holding in the other hand. It doesn't specify, or it doesn't allow wording for it can be later on. It implies that it must be done now.
Yes.
Whereas...
Which I don't think is as was intended in the way it was written. I think this is one of those clarification things where they've gone, actually, how we intended it to work was this.
Yeah.
So we're just going to clarify that you can. Although that being said, it's still not 100% clear. It's still open to interpretation.
Sure.
The
fact that it says later on the turn, I think that sort of gives it some flexibility, or at least tries to
I think
open
so.
up.
So then we look at the throne property. This looks about the same sort of length. Although, actually, I'm not going to read the original because I think this one is a little bit more self-explanatory how it's different. If a weapon has a thrown property, you can throw the weapon to make a ranged attack, and you can draw that weapon as part of the attack, which is something they highlighted in the design notes. If the weapon is a melee weapon, you use the same ability modifier for that attack roll and damage roll that you would use for a melee attack with the weapon. For example, if you throw a hand axe, you use your strength, but if you throw your dagger, you can use either your strength or dex, since the dagger has the finesse property. Now, I believe that's different, right?
I think that's the same with the throne property as it was.
Oh, no, it is actually. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, hand axe would be, as you all know very well, when Thoric throws Gladys as a hand axe, we use the strength because... Indeed. She's not a light gal. We need our strength to handle her. Whereas when dear Johan throws a nifty dagger, that's very much with his beautiful dexterity.
Yes, indeed. So the only thing that I can see that's changed then is the drawing the weapon as part of the ranged attack.
That's, I suppose, a clarification on maybe something that certainly when I DM, I'm very fun first with things like that. I'm quite easygoing on drawing weapons, changing weapons, things like that. I know other DMs would disagree, and there might be certain circumstance where things are there. I'm a huge fan of making sure that combat doesn't take 10 hours.
Sure.
And I think adding in having to draw and stow weapons as actions just becomes very clunky. And I think ultimately, if it's a universal rule that everyone can do these things, then I don't see the harm. I know there are certain feats that do specify bonuses to drawing and sheathing weapons and things like that. But I've always counted those. I've added extra bonuses for those things to counteract that being a thing. I think it just makes sense, particularly with throwing weapons, that you reach for something and throw it as part of that action.
Yeah, I like that this has been clarified in the rules, because I think I do differ on you with the drawing and
that's fair,
and stowing of weapons. Because and this is a thing I come up against with 5th edition a lot. Is the thing is because there's an exceptions based game design that goes on. In that here are the rules of the game, and here's this feature that breaks that rule. The problem is I find with 5th edition, you get into a position where you undermine certain character options, which I'd like to keep open for players to have a choice, and to possibly choose some less used character options if they want to.
Sure.
So I tend to be quite specific on sticking to the mechanics of the game. Not because I'm anti-rule of cool, but actually because I want that class option that you've chosen, or that feat you've chosen, to actually be valuable when you do choose it. So I have always been on the you can draw or sheath the weapon as part of your attack action, but you can't do both in one turn unless you have enough action economy stuff. So I like that they've clarified that this is part of that, because it kind of removes that debate, I think, from the DM that it's built into the system that for a thrown weapon specifically, so you can sheathe a weapon, I presume, and if you're throwing a weapon, you can also draw at the same time. I think I'm sure there's stuff in the rules glossary that when we get to that in a future discussion, we'll no doubt clarify some of that.
Sure.
But let's have a look at the mastery properties, and hopefully because we've only got about 15 or so minutes left, so let's hopefully see how far through the mastery property we can get. So the mastery property is a really cool thing. It's basically an unlockable feature that every weapon type has. The idea being that somebody like a fighter is the best at weapons, and so they get to unlock these extra things that they can do with weapons, extra abilities that they can do to basically make them better in combat than, say, like a rogue who possibly wouldn't have weapon mastery in some of these. So here are some of the descriptions of each mastery property presented in alphabetical order. If a game feature lets you replace a weapon's mastery property with another one, that weapon must meet any prerequisites specified for the new property. So it's like a weapon feat, basically, these mastery properties. So first we have Cleave, which actually does sound like, if you're familiar with the Cleave feature that monsters have, it's a very similar thing. The prerequisites is that it's a heavy weapon, and is a melee weapon. So with Cleave, if you hit a creature with a melee attack using this weapon, you can make an attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. On a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but you don't add your ability modifier to the damage unless that modifier is negative. You can make this extra attack only once per turn. So, like, I think it's orcs have the Cleave feature. It works essentially the same way. It's like, take somebody down, and then you're gonna move onto a second target. Now, interestingly, in how this is written, it does specify that you have to attack, as far as I can see, a separate creature. So it's not that you get to make 2 attacks against the same target. It's if you have 2 targets within reach, you get to attack. You attack one, and then you get to attack the second one for free. Is how I read that.
Yeah, cool. I'd agree with you. That makes sense, particularly if you're sort of thinking about, heavy weapon doing a really big sweep with it, where the energy is kind of carried through to another target. I think that makes sense and definitely adds some kind of nice flavor. I think that definitely adds some versatility to. It definitely kind of adds some economy onto some martial classes that use heavy weapons.
Yeah.
That can then it makes them more viable. I've seen some kind of house rules, and I've used different house rules for heavy weapons, because there's the conversation about having a slightly bigger die doesn't ultimately do that much, and you're kind of then losing an extra arm worth of versatility where you're not using a shield or not using an extra weapon.
Yeah.
I think anything that makes heavy weapons a more appealing prospect is good. You're sacrificing some defense potentially for some extra hit.
Yeah, and there aren't actually many weapons here that actually have Cleave. In fact, just as I'm scanning through now, I can see the halberd and the great axe. That's it. But I think that makes sense. I mean, definitely the great axe, you'd fully expect that. This is so much like in the barbarian territory.
Yes,
for sure, and it really adds, I think, quite a bit of flavor actually to the barbarian, and indeed any fighter or warrior class that uses it.
Definitely. With these mastery properties, I think the sort of order of service is the fact that it gives versatile properties to weapons that you wouldn't necessarily go for.
Yes.
The problem is, you see the damage die, and it's kind of, okay, well, I want to use a sword-like thing. And if my options are, okay, I can use I can use a scimitar, a short sword, or a rapier. Ultimately, the rapier has the better damage dice and still has a lot of the kind of je ne sais quoi of that kind of thing. I think people do, as players, fall into patterns of what weapons they choose, because they're not all created equal.
No, they're not.
And this seems to be maybe trying to fix some of that bias.
Yeah, well, I think also what it does is it because I think the thing is with the fifth edition weapons system is that once you've kind of got your weapon out, you've not really got much reason to change a weapon. And I think what this does is it gives you a choice to make outside of what's my damage dice,
Hmm.
a little bit more from a strategic perspective rather than necessarily a logistics perspective, which is nice.
Sure.
So let's go down to the next one, which is flex. So the prerequisite for this is that it needs to be a versatile weapon. So one that can be used either one-handed or two-handed. So the flex property, when you hit with a melee attack using this weapon, you deal its versatile damage even if you're wielding it in one hand. That's pretty cool.
That feels very nice.
It feels very very roguey actually, doesn't it? In a way. Kind of like
Yes.
a buff rogue. I could see. I mean, obviously, a rogue would have to unlock the. Probably have to take a feat to get mastery properties, but that feels very
Yeah.
roguey to me. It's got a lot of rogue energy.
Potentially. I mean, if you're thinking about, I don't know whether that would align with prerequisites of sneak attack. I think sneak attack has to be. Does sneak attack have to be a light weapon?
Although, hang on,
Or-
looking at the weapons here that have got flex, we're talking quarterstaff, we're talking spear, we're talking longsword, and warpick and warhammer.
Mhm.
So it maybe not so roguey actually, when you
Feels
look at
kind
what
of
weapons it is.
feels kind of paladin clericy. If I'm honest, where those kind of armored, sort of defensy but also offensy characters, where you're using things like a war axe or a war hammer or a longsword that have those abilities where you don't want to sacrifice that shield or
Yeah.
other thing that you have in that hand, but you also want to be a damage dealer. I think it might depend on a party build of thinking, do I want to increase my damage output as a melee person in relation to my other party members? Maybe you've got some squishier people, maybe you've got some more spell wielding allies that wouldn't necessarily get their hands dirty.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It'd be interesting to actually play test that one and see how that feels. But I like the idea. But again, there's so much focus on it being about the damage dice there. I don't know if actually, as part of the mastery properties, like the reason for having the system there, I don't know if that necessarily is the most exciting. Probably not.
Yeah, definitely.
But I like it. I like the idea of it.
Sure.
So let's look at greys. Now, this is a pretty cool one. So prerequisites are melee weapon heavy property. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you can deal damage to that creature equal to the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. The damage is the same type dealt by the weapon, and the damage can't be increased in any way other than increasing the ability modifier. So basically, it is as it describes, it's a graze. So you do actually do some damage, but you don't really make proper purchase with the weapon. So you're not getting your damage roll, which is obviously the most beefy bit. You're getting just the modifier of damage, which is pretty cool. Weapons with the graze feature include the glaive, the great sword. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Glaive and great sword.
Yeah. The glaive, I mean, both really nice weapons. Greatsword is a vocation. It's a constitution. I love the glaive. I think the glaive is maybe it's definitely top 3, if not my favorite.
It's totally underrated as well, the glaive.
There are some beautiful feats that you can take advantage of with the glaive. As one of the few kind of weapons with reach as well, I think that can be really, really strong. And really versatile. I think that's a nice feature. I think particularly with Greys, it's giving a lot of service to those melee characters with this feature potentially, where hitting things is your bread and butter. And I think sometimes with those classes it can be quite frustrating if you're having a bad dice day, or if you're having a day where you're hitting something more armed than you're used to, where you're hitting something with plate and a shield, and your enemies have AC 20, for example,
Mm.
can be very can make you feel a bit crap when, well, I hit things and I can't hit anything, that you are still nicking away at them. It kind of shows that your mastery of your weapon is still kind of pressing on your opponent, still kind of
Yes.
nicking them. It gives you a little boost, and I think that could be a nice way to still be chipping away at the HP of, particularly if you're facing, I don't know, a whole boatload of goblins where
Yeah.
the action economy works against you.
I mean, we've seen it with Bardic quests itself, you know, where Saga's just not hitting anything.
Yeah.
And she's meant to be the one that's best at fighting, and this allows at least that turn not to feel wasted, which is nice. All right, talking of nicking, that is indeed the next mastery property.
It's a whole different thing.
Which is prerequisite is light property. So when you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. You can still make this extra attack only once per turn. Okay, I mean,
that's a rogue. That's very good for a rogue. When you include that with their other bonus action features, having to sacrifice things like the cunning action to deal the extra damage, this would allow a dual-wielding rogue such as dear Johan to do a 2-weapon fighting attack on an opponent and still retain their bonus action for
I think it's actually more because obviously we've said that some of these feel quite roguey and paladin and things, but actually these are really designed for the warrior classes, which is your fighters, your barbarians, and your monks. So it will only really be those classes that will get the mastery properties by default. A rogue or a paladin, for example, would have to take a feat to get their mastery properties. So I think this is probably more targeted. Well, in fact, ranger would be the same, actually.
Yeah. So do some classes get the mastery feature as a prerequisite as opposed to a feat?
Yes. So these are designed for what are their grouping as the warriors, which are the barbarians, the fighters, and things.
I see.
So whilst it does feel very roguey, it's not actually designed for the rogue.
No, they would have to take something specific for that.
Yeah. But it's interesting.
Would still open up some economy for them. Not that they need any more economy, because they're pretty versatile.
Yeah, I mean, it would be worth unlocking this though, for sure, as a rogue.
Absolutely,
that'd be worth its weight. Nice. Okay. So then we have the push property, which prerequisites quite a few. Heavy, two-handed, or versatile property. So I think it has to have at least one of those.
I'm seeing pike. I'm seeing great club.
The heavy crossbow as well.
Oh.
Because it doesn't have to be a melee weapon. This one.
Oh, interesting.
So if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature up to 10 feet away from you if it is no more than one size larger than you. Pretty cool. Pretty simple.
I think that adds some nice flavor and it would allow you to choose those options. Pike's not something I've seen. There are other things that have similar stuff going for them that are quote unquote better. Being able to push your opponent with a pike, keeping them at bay, keeping a large creature at bay.
That's really flavorful, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really nice touch.
So then we have sap, the prerequisite, no other properties, which is great. No other properties. Interesting. So it's that. So we're looking at mace, flail, and I think that's it.
Morning Star as well.
And Morning Star, yeah. I thought I missed one. Yeah. So if you hit a creature with this weapon, that creature has disadvantage on its next attack roll before the start of your turn. So it's kind of like it's like stunning them, isn't it? Really, I suppose.
Yeah. They seem to be those kind of big bludgeoning.
Yeah. I wonder why they called it sap rather than stun. Because I think stun probably makes more sense. Sapping almost implies it's like necrotic.
Yes, I'd agree with you. I think the name is quite an odd choice. I would agree with you that stun or Stagger even would be a
Stagger's
better
good.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a nice
'Cause it-
simple one, I think fairly self-explanatory.
Mm.
I mean, I like the idea of. I mean, that's pretty cool, just being able to apply disadvantage to somebody. Just by
Applying
hitting them with a weapon.
disadvantage to an enemy that relies on melee attacks is huge.
That's
It
really
doesn't
good.
seem to have any other things. I suppose some things could have resistances to these things. It implies the possibility of that, but certain skills having no size problem. The fact that you could sap or stun a hill giant is pretty massive.
Yeah.
And quite flavorful.
Yeah, that's really cool. I do like that. I think in terms of actually the significance, I think that's actually a pretty significant one. That could really turn the tide of a battle quite quickly.
Definitely.
So then, just quickly before we wrap up, because I'm going to have to go in like 5 minutes, so let's quickly rush through these ones. So we have slow, prerequisite none, which is good. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. If you hit the creature more than once with this property, the speed reduction doesn't exceed 10 feet, so it doesn't stack.
Okay.
In terms of weapons, we're looking at club, javelin, crossbow light, sling.
I'm most excited by javelin being in that list as a thrown weapon. The fact that you could slow your enemy before they get to you, love it.
Yeah. We also have the whip in there, which I think gives the whip a good function. A longbow and the musket as well.
Ah, okay.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I quite like the flavorfulness of the musket having the slow feature.
Yeah.
Just like being hit so hard that you're just like staggering along.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that. But again, fairly self-explanatory. It's the ray of frost of the martial classes.
Absolutely.
Which I think is nice. A nice little ability. Then we have topple, prerequisites, heavy, reach, or versatile property. If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force the creature to make a Constitution saving throw with a DC equal to 8, plus your proficiency bonus, plus the ability modifier used to make the attack roll. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. That's cool.
That's cool. Making someone prone is huge. This is where we're seeing our old friend the lance with abilities such as this, and the trident. I can't see others.
No, I can't see others either. It was the trident and which one did you say?
The lance.
Oh, and the battle axe has topple as well.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does indeed.
Oh, okay. and the maul, actually, for that matter.
Yeah,
there's a few. There's a few in there. Interesting. I'm kind of intrigued by the weapons they've chosen, to be honest.
I can see the reasoning. Certainly with trident, the fact that you could like knock someone prone by hitting them with a lance certainly makes sense. That and a maul as well. Battle axe, I suppose that gives it a something as opposed to the great axe.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, it differentiates them a little bit, doesn't it?
And gives you an opportunity. I don't know whether it kind of represents, sweeping the leg, whether it's trying to kind of represent different abilities.
I'm wondering if it's kind of like just getting them in the gut and just winding them to the point that they drop onto the ground, maybe.
Absolutely. Maybe. I think there's definitely sort of big avenues for kind of flavorful descriptions of how these things come about as a player, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Rather than I hit them and I have done damage and now it's not my turn.
Which does, if you're in a long combat, it can devolve into that quite easily.
Yeah. One thing I do enjoy about Bardic Quest is that we always have you give us room for a little seasoning on the hits, which is quite nice.
It's something I've actually had to work on as a DM for a long time, because I was never, for a very long time, my combats would quickly devolve into like, you hit, you do damage, you hit, you do damage. So I am very conscious of it. So I appreciate the props. Thank you. So finally, just before we wrap up, then Vex prerequisite. This is the final of the weapon mastery properties. Prerequisites: ammunition, finesse, or light property. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your turn. So it's basically the opposite of the sap, isn't it? Is you're granting yourself advantage rather than giving them disadvantage, which is equally as valuable.
Again, I'm not sure about the name. Like, you're vexing your opponent. I suppose in a world where firearms aren't very common, you would be quite vexed if someone shot you in the chest with a pistol. You're like, what the hell was that?
yeah.
What is that thing you're holding?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what they're going with, isn't it? It's pistol, blowgun, hand crossbow, short sword, rapier. It's all of these weapons that you would really be pissed off if somebody got a hit in, like dart, short, like it's all the kind of like what are the shitty weapons that you'd be really pissed off if somebody actually managed to hit you with.
Just incredulous.
Yeah. particularly the blowgun. I love that.
Yeah. I think a really good way to TPK a party would be to just have a band of people armed with all the weapons that you're not really threatened by. They all come at you with slings and darts and nets. You're like, okay, we're going to make short work of these guys, and they all are vexed and upset. Yeah.
So we're going to have to wrap up there because I have to dash in a moment. But that's at least we got through the mastery properties and the weapons stuff, aside from the adventuring gear updates, which we can cover next time if we do a live stream. But yes, do let us know in the comments if this is something that is to you, our Bardic Quest audience, that you'd like us to do more of, because it's been pretty fun. I kind of like looking through these things in this sort of detail, because I don't think I would otherwise, to be fair. But it's fun, and I like where they're going with this mastery properties thing. I think it's got a lot of value, both from a mechanical standpoint, but also I think it's really flavorful. It really helps you to picture exactly what's going on the battlefield in a way that I think would be easy to overlook, and as we say, kind of devolve into I do damage quite quickly. This kind of forces narrative structure almost onto the combat, which I am always a huge fan of, because I think combat can become a slog sometimes in 5th edition, so it's nice to see some tweaks.
Absolutely. It's been good fun having a little chat through these, and I think there's definitely some nice stuff within all this gubbins to digest and to take ownership of. It's always a delight.
Yes. So if we do another one of these, which I'm hoping we will, then I suppose probably next time we'll be looking at the arcane spell list, which looks very fun. All right, so we will wrap up there, but obviously don't forget to let us know your thoughts in the comments. Let's get a nice cool debate about the mastery system. That'd be pretty cool. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video to help us appease those algorithm gods. And yes, we will hopefully do another one of these very soon, and we'll see you then.
Wonderful. Farewell.
All right, lovely.
Nice. Lovely stuff.
Okay. Stop recording.
Yeah, one thing that I think would be quite